Hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Now, today, I admit it, Metroid Prime basically broke me. And I'll get to that in a couple moments here, but Prime 2 here is significantly harder than Prime 1. And through the course of today's video alone, the making of this, I died more times making this one video than I have died in the rest of the Prime trilogy combined. It's very impressive, actually. Anywho, we're starting off exactly where we left off last time, fighting off some space pirates on the outskirts of the Torvus Temple. Now, yes, last time I got a little greedy. I was so gung-ho about trying to beat these guys that I didn't, look at the fact that I only had about 100 health. And that really didn't help me any. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of going to be a long-standing problem going forward that the enemies are going to be bulkier than anything we faced prior. And it's going to make this a significantly harder challenge than what would otherwise be common. And nowhere is that more evident than in the bosses of Prime 2. See, Prime 2, for all of its strengths, all of its capabilities, all of its unique atmosphere, everything the game has to throw at you that shows you just why Metroid Prime 2 is the most beloved in the franchise. There's a couple things that are flaws with it. Now, I want to be as outright forthcoming and whatnot as I can be. Metroid Prime 2, the original version of the game, was never built with Hypermode in mind. But in the re-release for Nintendo Wii, the Metroid Prime trilogy, each of the three games received an upgrade. Well, the first two did. Prime 3 already had it. Prime 1 got the hyper mode difficulty treatment, and it more or less just made a couple of the enemies a little bit bulkier. It made them hit a little bit harder. Prime 2, however, has a number of environmental hazards that make its world that much more dangerous than Talon 4 ever was. Prime 2 had a was built from the ground up to be darker, harder than its predecessor. And this is very evident in how the world itself functions. You have the overworld and the dark world. The light world is as similar to Prime 1 as can be. It's the safer of the two areas. It allows for the most easy traversal, it keeps the player engaged, and you get to see the world through the eyes of Samus. That's amazing. And then we have the Dark World. Now, the Dark World, depending on how far into the game you are, is more or less dangerous. Now, an example of it being less dangerous comes in the form of the light bubbles, which heal the player over time. 1 HP per second, making it so that Samus could effectively stop what she's doing and heal at any point throughout the entire adventure. The other is that she, prior to gaining the Dark Suit, loses 5 health points per second, every second for the entirety of the early portion of the game, while in the Dark World's air, meaning, by extension, that Samus is significantly weaker than otherwise expected. Now, on its own, this is not the end of the world. But when you couple it with the fact Samus loses far more health and battles last far longer in Hypermode, the difficulty balancing of Prime 2 kind of gets skewed, making it a lot more frustrating than the original game was intended to be. This isn't a bad thing, it's just the thing. It's part of what makes the game design work or fail. And I say that with all the investment I can say that it is still a fantastic game, flaws included. Now, these Grenchlers more or less fill the same role as the Sheegoth did in the prior game. What I like about the Grenchler over the Sheegoth, however, is that there is no easy mode button later on in the game. When you're dealing with the Grenchler, you're dealing with a Grenchler. It's never, oh, I have this special weapon that makes it easy for me to defeat my opponents in a single strike, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And I kind of like that aspect of Prime 2's weapon choices. Prime 1 had a lot of early game is hard, mid game is easy. Early game is hard, mid game makes all of the early game enemies an absolute breeze. And the late game makes most of the mid game enemies an absolute breeze, and so on and so forth. Effectively, the areas that are dangerous in Prime 1 is limited only to the newest area you're in. Whereas Prime 2 had the mentality of, this is a very dangerous world. Therefore, the player should experience the fear, the concern about the world in and of itself, and how it functions. Okay. I explained it prior to a small degree that this video, this section broke me. And I think it's time I dive into that. So, in the beginning of the game, Samus is attacked by the Ing. And the Ing take a number of Samus's abilities from her. And in and of itself, this isn't a bad thing. This isn't a problem. However, Prime 2 has a series of bosses that are significantly harder than Prime 1. I've mentioned this. Now, most of the time, they balance the bosses in the Dark World by having the light bubbles. Effectively, you're kinda stuck to a smaller area because of the light bulb. You're stuck in a smaller area because of the light bubble, but you're also healing when you're stuck in said location, so it's not that bad. But some rare bosses go above and beyond their ordinary scaling by making it so that the player has no safe zone in the battle whatsoever. Now, sometimes this is to the game's benefit. I personally love the battle against Quadraxis. But the first battle that really does this, the first one that throws caution to the wind, is the Boost Guardian. Now, the Boost Guardian under a normal playthrough is pretty simplistic. You fight it for a couple seconds, it goes into an invulnerable state, tries to attack you a couple times, you hit it with a couple of Morph Ball bombs, it gets defeated, or it gets knocked out of invincibility, rinse and repeat. But when on a strict timer, that every single time you get hit, the timer gets shortened by a good minute, it really begins to be a drain on your resources. And this is kind of the main issue with the Boost Guardian as a whole. Its design philosophy was not built around Hypermode. Don't get me wrong. I think that this is actually a mechanically rich battle. It is effectively, for all intents and purposes, an Ing warrior. Ing warriors are... Sorry. Apparently I didn't sleep well last night. Ing warriors have two battle forms. That's their puddle form and their upright three-legged form. Now, while in puddle form, they are vulnerable. At least Ing warriors are. However, the Boost Guardian has an additional phase. This being the invulnerable phase. During this phase, the Boost Guardian uses Samus's Boost Ball ability to try to deal damage to Samus without Samus necessarily being available, or without Samus having much of an option to avoid it. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't see this as the end of the world. There's enough power-ups and healing in this battle to make it more than possible. But as I said, this is a little bit of a mechanically rich boss for Prime 1. Or for Prime 2, sorry. Really, I'm having a day. For one, attack patterns, it has the short-range claw swipe. It has the laser beams. It has the puddle, which can damage on contact. It has effectively the ability to damage any creature on contact, as well as the boost ball. If it runs into Samus on hyper mode, Samus loses a minute of time, bare minimum. So this battle becomes a speed-based battle, not a battle of power. Which is all well and good. The Boost Guardian is vulnerable to light energy. But the thing is that under ideal circumstances, everything goes absolutely perfect. No, Samus doesn't take any excess damage. What are we looking at for actual time in this battle? Time-wise, Samus has, at this moment, 900 to 1,000 seconds. 900 seconds. That's it. Now, that is assuming that Samus takes 0 damage. But it is so unlikely to happen that you're going to end up with a situation where you probably have about 600 seconds. Or upper limit 10 minutes. This seems like a lot. And for a Metroid Prime boss battle, absolutely it is. The problem is that Metroid Prime's boss battles are not This particular boss was designed with a particular mentality in mind, and I think its design philosophy falls apart at later points in time. Now, theoretically, Samus can last longer by using upgrades or enemies throughout the boss that show up, like the small ing puddles that appear, but they only appear from after certain objects have been destroyed by the Boost Guardian itself, meaning that the big health upgrades that Samus can get to increase her health pool by 100 are also to her detriment because they add more enemies into the battle for the later portions of the fight. All of this is to say that Samus has the capability and should always have the capability, but theoretically lacks a lot of the versatility at times to be able to fight this enemy head on. Now, I said this broke me. This video took almost 2 hours to record because it is that unforgiving, that punishing if something goes wrong. Now you're probably looking at the timestamp on the bottom thinking we're 16 minutes in. And it's only a 24-minute video. What do you mean it took me 2 hours to record? I lost this battle a minimum of 10 times. And took a large majority of them out of this video simply because it's not going to add anything to see me get my butt kicked 15 times over. Although, for those who who enjoy seeing people get their butt kicked, that would be a video for later. But I lost a lot in this particular battle. I died more fighting this one boss than I have ever lost in the trilogy over the span of the last 20 years. Therefore, I'm very confident that after this run, I will probably never play Hypermode Metroid Prime again. It's not to say that it's a bad game. Rather, it's just it was never designed for Hypermode. Anywho, I came up with a couple solutions to deal with the Boost Guardian faster. First things first, we got to acknowledge that the Boost Guardian can only hit enemies that are on the ground. This means that, in theory, Samus can deal large portions of damage and then avoid by bouncing like a hooligan over the Boost Guardian to try to avoid its attacks. Secondly, the Boost Guardian does defeat its partners every time they run into it, meaning that there's now 2 means of damage, or you can use that to upgrade the damage dealt. Great. The light beam also has a stun effect that does a fair bit of damage to the Boost Guardian. The problem comes from the late stage of the battle, where the Boost Guardian's timer on its vulnerable state gets shortened by about half, and its invulnerable state increases in length to about double. Now, I would say this isn't the end of the world, but it is notable for being significantly harder to get around at times. Like I said, not the end of the world, just a thing that needs to be mentioned. Now, theoretically, Samus could just hide on top of one of the statues after the Boost Guardian goes into invulnerable state to try to avoid getting attacked by the Boost Ball. The problem comes from if the Boost Ball runs into one of the statues, that's kind of all you can do. So, for now, I'm going to focus more so on light beam damage. Because the light beam does about 2 to 3 times the damage of the power beam, it means that I can rather consistently beat this boss without too many headaches. Anywho. Now that we've gotten to this point in the game, I have to say, I never gave Prime 2 enough credit for its difficulty. I had always just kind of played the game on normal mode. I never even touched Veteran until this. So this is entirely new territory for me. And that's kind of scary at times. I survived with 4 HP. I think this is the run. Well, of course it's the run. I took out all but the first 2 in the last attempt. But it just goes to show that this attempt, for everything that went right, there's 4 other things that could have went wrong. And I finish off the battle with just under 100 health, making this easily one of the hardest boss battles in the franchise to this point. But we're obviously not done. So, we're going to get the first of the Dark World, Dark Torvus keys, and head back to the save point for today. Because I'm a little burnt out of Metroid Prime 2 today. I'll come at it next week and we'll continue where we left off. If you like what you see, I encourage you to drop a like, leave a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. As we are going to continue. No matter how dangerous, no matter how ridiculous this challenge gets, I refuse to give up. And thus, I intend to finish this. One way or another. Luck, skill, whatever comes my way, that's what's going to happen to make sure this happens. Anywho, I hope you all have a good one. I didn't think Prime 2 was going to give me this much of a headache, but live and learn.